The Mary Celeste was not a mystery, it was a distraction. By the time that abandoned brigantine made international headlines in 1872, Lloyd's of London had already quietly settled claims on at least a dozen vessels found in identical circumstances, and sealed every file before anyone could ask the obvious question. The story most people know goes like this. December 1872, the British merchant ship De Gradia discovers the Mary Celeste adrift in the Atlantic between the Azores and Portugal. Cargo intact, provisions untouched, no signs of violence, no crew. The case became the ghost ship, the defining mystery of the sea. Books were written, theories multiplied. Arthur Conan Doyle turned it into fiction, and somewhere in all that noise, the real question got buried. Why did everyone act as though nothing like this had ever happened before? It had happened before, multiple times. The North Atlantic shipping lanes between Britain, the Azores, and the Eastern American seaboard were, throughout the mid-19th century, producing abandoned vessels at a frequency that the maritime insurance industry found deeply inconvenient. Ships found with meals still set on tables, livestock still alive in the hold, logbooks ending mid-sentence in calm weather. Not piracy, nothing taken. Not storms, no structural damage, not fire, not plague. The crews were simply gone, and the ships sailed on without them. What Lloyd's of London understood, and what they worked methodically to suppress, was that a pattern was forming. Individual cases could be explained away. A pattern could not. Their internal claims records from the 1850s through the early 1870s document at least 12 vessels recovered under circumstances categorically identical to the Mary Celeste. The Nova Scotia registered brig Resolute Anne, 1857. The Liverpool timber hauler Caro Fell, 1863. The Portuguese-flagged Estrela de Mar, 1869. Case files opened, claims settled in full and in silence. Records transferred to a restricted archive division that Lloyd's would not formally acknowledge existed until a parliamentary inquiry forced partial disclosure in 1891, an inquiry whose own findings were subsequently classified under maritime security provisions and removed from public record. The reason they sealed those files was stated plainly in internal correspondence recovered through a private archive acquisition in 2003. The language is bureaucratic, but the fear underneath it is not. Claims Director Aldous Pemberton wrote to the underwriting board in March of 1871, 18 months before the Mary Celeste was found, that continued public knowledge of recurring crew disappearances in the North Atlantic would, quote, produce such alarm among merchant families and shipping investors as to devastate the trade routes on which the empire's commercial interests depend. The losses would not be from the sea, they would be from panic. So they bought the silence. They paid the claims, sealed the files, and waited. And when the Mary Celeste finally broke into the newspapers anyway, they were ready. They let it become a curiosity, a single strange event, a legend, because a legend has no pattern, and a pattern was the one thing they could not afford for people to see. The Mary Celeste made headlines in 1872 because someone let it. That was the mistake. For roughly 3 decades before that, Lloyd's of London had maintained an almost perfect silence around a category of maritime claim that their internal ledgers simply called anomalous abandonment. Not wreck, not piracy, not storm loss, anomalous abandonment. The distinction matters. A wrecked ship tells a story. An abandoned one asks a question they could not afford to answer publicly. The sealed claim files, portions of which surfaced in a 1991 archival review at Guildhall Library before being quietly recategorized as restricted commercial documents, reference at least 11 vessels between 1840 and 1872 that arrived in North Atlantic shipping lanes, crewless, undamaged, with provisions intact and no distress signal ever recorded. The Gloriana out of Liverpool in 1843, the Resolute Star, 1851. The vessel logged only as Case 7 North in the Lloyd's Internal Register. Date approximated to winter 1858. Cargo of salted cod, found drifting 40 miles off the Newfoundland shelf with the cook's meal still warm on the iron stove. Warm. That detail appears in a single surviving surveyor's note and nowhere else. Someone crossed it out in pencil. Someone else circled it in red ink decades later. and that is how it was found. What the insurance architecture of the period reveals is not chaos, but policy. Claims on anomalous abandonment were settled faster than any other category, often within weeks, with claimants required to sign confidentiality agreements as a condition of payout. This was not standard practice. Piracy claims, storm loss claims, even suspected fraud cases dragged on for years in admiralty courts. These were buried quietly and quickly. Maritime historian Gerald Parkin, writing in a 1987 monograph on Victorian insurance law that received almost no mainstream attention, described the speed of these settlements as institutionally inexplicable unless suppression was the explicit goal. Lloyd's never responded to his findings. The monograph went out of print within 18 months. The anomalies across the 11 documented cases share a fingerprint that defies conventional explanation. No bodies, no lifeboats deployed, no evidence of fire, flooding, or structural failure. In several cases, navigation logs were found mid-entry, as though the writer simply stopped existing between one word and the next. Personal effects remained. In the Case 7 or North file, a surveyor noted that a wool coat, a Bible, and a child's wooden toy were found arranged neatly on a bunk, as though placed there deliberately. No child was listed on the manifest. When the surveyor flagged this discrepancy in his report, the page containing that notation was torn out before the file was archived. The torn edge is still visible. The file exists. The page does not. By the time the Mary Celeste drifted into history, Lloyd's had a protocol. They knew exactly what kind of ship this was before the Admiralty inquiry concluded. The difference this time was the press. A salvage crew talked before anyone could stop them. The inquiry became public. And so Lloyd's did the only thing they could do, which was to let the world argue about pirates and waterspouts and sea monsters, because every theory that circled the Mary Celeste was a theory that did not circle the 11 cases before it. The mystery of one ship is a curiosity. The pattern of 12 is a catastrophe. They spent 30 years and considerable money making sure you would never be allowed to see. Lloyd's of London did not stumble into the Mary Celeste case unprepared. They had a playbook. Buried in the sealed underwriting archives from 1820 through 1872, researchers found claim settlements tied to at least 14 vessels recovered adrift in the North Atlantic. Crews absent, meals still on tables, navigational logs abruptly terminated mid-sentence. The ships had different names, different flags, different owners, but the pattern was identical. And in every case, Lloyd's paid the claim quickly, quietly, and attached confidentiality clauses to the settlements that legally bound the salvors and insurers from public disclosure. The Mary Celeste became famous only because a journalist broke the story before the machinery could seal it. Every case before her was swallowed whole. The reason they moved to suppress it was not supernatural panic, it was financial. The North Atlantic shipping lanes represented the economic spine of the industrialized world. Cargo insurance, hull insurance, crew life policies, Lloyd's underwrote all of it. If the public understood that ships were being found abandoned with no explanation at a rate of roughly one per year, the underwriting market collapses, premiums become uninsurable, trade routes get abandoned. So they made a calculation that institutional silence was cheaper than honest accounting. They were right, and it worked for 50 years. The Mary Celeste cracked that silence open, but even then, the deeper pattern never made it into the official inquiry. The court asked about one ship. The archives held 14. What actually happened to those crews remains documented only in fragments. Coded entries, missing pages, contradictory testimonies from salvors who later recanted. Some researchers point to natural atmospheric phenomena, sudden hypoxic events capable of incapacitating everyone aboard simultaneously. Others focus on the cargo manifest, several of which listed experimental or volatile chemical shipments that never appeared in the official Lloyd's claim documentation. The suppression was not just about money, it was about preventing questions that the maritime establishment had no intention of answering. What do you think happened in those shipping lanes? Drop your theory in the comments, because the range of explanations in this community consistently runs deeper than anything the official record ever offered. If you want the stories they spent decades and fortunes making sure you never heard, subscribe now. Every week we dig up another story they hoped you'd never find.